All right, welcome back to Rewatch or Return, the podcast where we put movies through the ultimate test across 10 universal categories to decide, does it call for a definite rewatch, a definite trip to the return bin, or does our subjectivity cause it to fall somewhere in between? This week, we are going to look at Apollo 13. Why? Because this is the 30th anniversary this year of Apollo 13, and Jim Lovell, who was essentially the central character, the central person in the film, leader, if you will, played by Tom Hanks, passed just recently. And so the kind of to acknowledge that and pay tribute to him, and then also because this film is now 30 years old, and I do believe, don't quote me on this, but I think they're getting ready to release this in IMAX or re-release it in theaters for a brief period for the 30th anniversary. So we will this week be checking out Apollo 13. Came out in 1995. All right, let's go right into fast forward facts. Houston, we have a segment. Let's launch into the fast facts behind Apollo 13, the 1995 historical space drama that turned a near disaster into one of the most gripping survival stories ever put on film. Directed by Ron Howard, this film recreated the real-life events of NASA's ill-fated Apollo 13 mission in 1970, where an onboard explosion forced the astronauts to abort their mission to the moon and fight for survival while engineers on the ground raced to bring them home. Tom Hanks stars as astronaut Jim Lovell, the commander of the mission, bringing his usual everyman charm and steady resolve to the role. Hanks was already hot off Forrest Gump at the time and gave Apollo 13 the heart and authenticity it needed. In preparation for the part, Hanks spent time with the real Jim Lovell and even flew in NASA's zero-gravity simulator to get a feel for weightlessness that he would feel in space. Joining Hanks in the capsule were Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert and Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, while Gary Sinise played replaced crew member Ken Mattingly. Fun fact, Bacon replaced John Travolta, who was originally considered for the part. Bacon's late entry didn't hurt the chemistry, though. The trio delivered intense, claustrophobic performances that carried the film's emotional and physical tension. Meanwhile, back on Earth, Ed Harris gave a commanding Oscar-nominated performance as Gene Kranz, NASA's flight director known for his white vest and steel nerves. Kathleen Quinlan, playing Jim Lovell's wife Marilyn, also earned an Oscar nod for her role, adding emotional weight and human perspective to the ordeal. Speaking of authenticity, this film didn't fake space. Okay, it kind of did, but Apollo 13 is famous for being one of the first movies to film inside NASA's quote-unquote vomit comet aircraft. Allowing the actors to float in genuine microgravity, they logged over 600 parabolic arcs in the plane, filming dozens of scenes in true zero-G to make the visuals stunningly realistic. The script is based on Jim Lovell's book, Lost Moon, co-written with Jeffrey Kluger, and it's packed with historically accurate dialogue, including the now iconic line, "Houston, we have a problem," which was slightly altered from the real-life quote, but became legendary nonetheless. At the box office, the movie soared, earning over $355 million worldwide in 1995 and snagging 9 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. It won 2 Best Sound and Best Film Editing, fitting since so much of the film's power comes from the tense silence of space and the clipping urgency of radio chatter. More than just a survival thriller, Apollo 13 is a tribute to ingenuity, to teamwork, and the quiet heroism of science under pressure. The real mission was called a successful failure, and this film made sure its legacy succeeded far beyond the launch pad. All right, with that down, let's jump straight into what the critics said. This is where we look at the first 10 top critics on Rotten Tomatoes and see what they had to say. First of all, the tomato meter on this film for the critics is a 94%, and the popcorn meter, meaning the audience score, is an 87%. So this was a pretty high-rated film, especially by the critics, being a 94. Start with Bob Finster, who's from the Arizona Republic, and he says, as the men in the ship and the command center scramble to solve one potentially fatal problem after another, the power of the story emerges from inside the drift of the movie. Apollo 13 becomes a tribute to the scientific achievements of the human race. Jeff Strickler from Minneapolis Star-Tribune says, for Apollo 13, the 1970 space mission, everything went wrong. But for Apollo 13, the movie, Everything Goes Right. Director Ron Howard, who has a history of blowing hot and cold, is so far into his hot mode in this movie that he's dang near on fire, he says. Michael H. Price from Fort Worth Star and Telegram, DFW.com. It's a historical account, but as thrilling and upbeat as a tale is... Let me start that over. It's a historical account, but as thrilling and upbeat a tale as any fiction writer could hope to tell. Now we have Manola Dargis, I don't know if that's said right, but from LA Weekly, who says Vietnam, or more precisely its absence, haunts Apollo 13, along with the civil rights movement and women's liberation. Okay. In fact, the entire country has gone MIA, in its place a land shaped more along the lines of Mayberry. It says RFD, but I'm wondering if that's supposed to be FDR, because... I'm not really sure what that's supposed to be saying. I do have a problem with this critique, though. I mean, this is a movie about a particular mission, and I'm going to say something real fast. You don't have to like this movie. You don't have to like a movie. But these kind of critiques on, here's a movie about space that I wish had more about... it's about a space mission that failed, right? So I want it to be more about... Vietnam and the civil rights movement and women's liberation. This is just a person that has beef on and an agenda in some shape, form, or fashion, wanting that agenda crammed into a film. Well, this film has nothing to do with any of that stuff. Why would you include it necessarily? They went straight into telling the story of this mission, and that's what you should be complaining about, not the absence of things that have nothing to do with this. That's my little spiel there. Again, you don't have to like the movie, but don't make, I'm going to say it, pretty ignorant statements as a review. Frank Bruni from Detroit Free Press. The space shots are dazzling, providing a thrilling journey into the cosmos. Even more impressive is the way the movie manages to be sincere about such oft maligned notions as patriotism and heroism without becoming Hallmark card cloying. Jay Carr from Boston Globe says, Apollo 13 might not be as faceted as The Right Stuff, great film, or as interested in demythification, or even as interested in asking hard questions, but it believes in its heroics, and you'll believe in them too. Harper Barnes from St. Louis Post-Dispatch says, Apollo 13 is one of the best of the big summer movies, and a fitting tribute to brave men working at the top of their form under almost impossible circumstances. Derek Malcolm from The Guardian says, you know almost everything about this film before you go in, but the film makes it possible to suspend disbelief at the essential blandness of the human characters on... Wait, what? But in the film, you know almost everything about this film before you go in, but the film makes it possible to suspend disbelief at the essential blandness of the human characters on, and there's the technology to it, and there's the technology to admire. I feel like that could have been worded in a way that made a little bit more sense, but that was sort of choppy and screwed with my mind. I apologize. Hugo Davenport from the Daily Telegraph says, it is to the credit of Howard's film, at least, that excessive flag waving is avoided. Sadly, the narrative is often as underpowered as the lunar module which brings the astronauts home. Eleanor Ringel Carter from Atlanta Journal-Constitution says, we buy Apollo's peril because we buy the performances. Computers blip, modules spin through the stars, and everyone blathers arcane techno jargon. But in the end, Apollo 13 is an actor's movie. And that is what the critics said about Apollo 13. Moving right along to First Time or 50th. This is where we will say whether this was the first watch or a nostalgic return to the film, and how that might have influenced the viewing. Well, this is one of my all-time favorite films. I think it's very well done, and I've always loved this movie from the time it came out when I was a kid. 1995, I would have been 7-ish, 8-ish, something like that maybe. But I enjoyed it very much when it came out, and it has always been one of my favorites, and I've seen this movie more times probably than I can count on both hands for sure. And yes, that probably influenced how I watched the film, because I do have such fondness for this film. Not just because it's a good movie, but I like the story, right? It's an inspiring story, so I just have a fondness, a special place in my heart for this film and for what these guys went through. And so, yeah, I mean, I've seen this movie tons, and I'm going to watch it many, many, many more times to come. I'm surprised at a lot of people who haven't seen this movie. Funny enough, I told somebody the other day, they asked me what I was doing, and I said I was watching Apollo 13, and they said, is that the one with the girl from the Hunger Games? And I was like, no. What are you talking about? And then I realized that they thought, when I said I was watching Apollo 13, that I was watching Passengers, I believe. That's what they thought Apollo 13 was. They thought it was Passengers with Jennifer Lawrence and Chris Pratt. That it was quite comical to me, but I was like, no, this is a true story about a space mission that went very wrong. Not Passengers, totally fictional sci-fi film. May do Passengers one day, but this is not that film. Anyway, first time or 50th, I might have seen this movie 15 times or more, just a guess. But I own it, and I will watch it many, many more times in the future, I am sure. All right, before we jump into the final segment, today's episode is brought to you by PrepStartsNow.com, your go-to spot for emergency and outdoor preparedness. If you're anything like me, you'd rather be prepared and not need it than need the essentials and not have them. From 72-hour emergency essentials to camping gear, car emergency essentials, multi-tools, first aid, and even home gardening supplies as you start to grow some of your own food, they've got you covered for all of it. And the best part is, as a listener, you can use the promo code REWATCH to get a 15% site-wide discount, and you'll also be helping out the show as they give us a small reward for your business in the process. Head to PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch. That is PrepStartsNow.com/discount/rewatch, or simply enter the code REWATCH at checkout and get prepared today. All right, with that down, let's jump into a real quick recap of the film. There's not a lot to say. I'm not going to go scene by scene or anything of the nature with this film, but basically this film is based on a 1970 moon mission where these guys were the backup crew for the Apollo 13 mission, if I'm remembering correctly, and due to some things, they get bumped up to where they are the main crew, and they are now going to the moon. So I believe Jim Lovell and these guys were supposed to go on a later mission, but they got bumped up to this one. So you've got these guys who are getting ready to go to the moon, and they say that one of them has been exposed to the measles, and all the other guys had the measles, so they didn't expect them to get the measles after they've had it already. The only person that hadn't was Ken Mattingly, who was played by Gary Sinise. And so what ended up happening was their backup crew, one of them being Kevin Bacon's character, or person he was portraying, Jack Swigert, was the backup for Ken Mattingly. So he takes over. So now it is Jim Lovell, Tom Hanks as Jim Lovell, Bill Paxton as Fred Hayes, and Kevin Bacon as Jack Swigert, and they are now the three crewmen that are going to go to the moon on Apollo 13. And so, I believe it was Apollo 11 that initially landed on the moon. We will not have a conversation about whether you think we did or did not go to the moon. That's not what this is about. This is about a film. And anyway, so 11 was the moon landing, the initial moon landing, I believe, with Armstrong and Aldrin and the other fella that I am forgetting. Sad that guy's name gets forgotten. But they end up going. Ken Mattingly gets left behind. As they leave, they're in space and everything seems to be fine. While they're in space, there is a oxygen tank, some wiring or something goes wrong, and so there's an explosion as the oxygen tanks are being stirred, and now they are stranded in space, and they realize that NASA realizes in their figuring of things, hey, they're not going to be able to make it to the moon. Like, we're not going to be able to complete this mission right now. This is turning into a rescue mission. We've just got to get these guys home, and that's what this is going to become now. So they tell them basically that, and Jim Lovell, Tom Hanks says, guys, we just lost the moon. And all he was wanting to do was go walk on the moon, right? But he didn't get to. Anyway, so he they start this whole process of like, how do we get these guys home? And one thing leads to another, one obstacle after another. They have to solve this, they have to solve that, they have to solve this, they have to solve that. A whole bunch of problems they've got to solve and get worked out just simply to get them turned around and be able to make it home with enough oxygen left, with enough resources to run the ship and power in the batteries and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole deal. Ken Mattingly gets called in to help them after everything has been powered down to save the battery on the ship. They can only power up so many things so that they don't burn up all the battery, and they have to be under so many amps. So Ken Mattingly comes in and he goes through all these different steps on how they would fire all this stuff up and what they can use and what they can't use, and he finally gets it right. And so he's a major part of helping get them home, even though he was not on the ship and didn't get to go. But ultimately, these guys make it home, and while it was a failed mission, like it said in the facts of the matter earlier, this was called a successful failure, and everybody made it home safe, everybody survived, and yeah, so that's essentially the film. But it is very well done, and throughout, it's more than that. The film is able to expand on things and really help you live in these moments and make you feel them. But anyway, that's kind of a rundown on the film. Now, let's jump right into the final verdict, which is where we put the film to the test across 10 categories on a scale from 1 to 5. Those categories are judged on a 1 to 5 scale. So that is 5 being excellent, 4 being good, 3 being fair, 2 being weak, and 1 being poor. And then we might land somewhere in there with some, decimal numbers, some in between there. I don't feel real good just sticking with these hard hole numbers there. But ultimately, when this is done, we'll see the final verdict and see how this whole thing was scored. And this is not any objective score for this film. This is my own subjective position and opinion about things and how I feel about the film. If you feel differently, then that's fantastic, and you're more than welcome to feel differently. That is the beauty of art. First, let's start off with story and plot. Is the narrative compelling and coherent? Does it still hold up on a rewatch? First of all, is the narrative compelling and coherent? Yes, this is a very well-written movie. Obviously, it is a true story. I'm sure there are things like any true story that are dramatized or changed just slightly to make things flow better for a film. But it is a very, very compelling story. It's a very coherent plot. It's very understandable. It makes sense. It flows well. They do a good job of not hanging in and feeling like they have to drag you along with trying to explain things, you know what I mean? Like sometimes the exposition will cause people to go like, okay, you don't have to keep repeating what's going on. I'm able to pick up what's going on. This movie does well keeping you informed without just like constantly like holding it in front of your face to make sure that you know what's happening. Does it still hold up on a rewatch? Yes, it very much holds up on a rewatch, in my opinion. I think a lot of that has to do with things that we'll talk about later. But for story and plot, I gave this a 5 out of 5 because, one, it is an incredible story on its own before it's a film. Then adapted for film, I don't feel like I can give it anything less than 5 out of 5. I think that like the story itself is excellent, and it is a very strong highlight of the film. It's a 5 out of 5 for me. You may feel differently. Characters and performances would be the next category. Are the characters memorable and well acted, or forgettable and flat? Well, they're playing real people, so these are not like written characters or somebody embodying some fictional something. But these are men who are trying to play real life people. They do a good job of portraying these people, from my understanding, portraying their smarts and how they were supposed to be. You know, their how they were understood to be as people, their mannerisms and all that kind of stuff. As far as performances, I think they gave great performances. I think that they this was a fantastic. I mean, it's kind of like Tom Hanks has done this in Castaway as well. I mean, it's really hard to carry a movie just by yourself, and you're the guy, and it's just you, and there's nothing else. But these guys were basically, it was three dudes stuck in a little bitty tight confined space for the majority of the film. Now, obviously, you've got cut back to the guys on the ground and all that kind of stuff, but your main characters are very, very well done, very, very well acted. I don't think they're forgettable or flat in any way at all. I think that that's a major part of what makes this film so great, is because you buy the sincerity of the, you know, the job that they're doing, the acting. I mean, you feel what's happening it's genuine. It feels, it doesn't feel fake. It doesn't feel like acting. It feels like it's what's really happening, which is what you want to see. And so for characters and performances, I give this a 4.5 out of 5 because it's between good and excellent. I'm going to say across the board, there's some kind of basic characters in the film, but then you have your main guys that just, I think, really nailed it and knocked it out of the park. So 4.5 out of 5 for characters and performances. Next, we'll move on to pacing and entertainment value. Were you entertained the whole time? Did the movie keep your attention? Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I am always entertained watching this film. No matter how many times I've seen this film, every time I watch it, I get sucked into the drama, to the edge of my seat, it's just very entertaining movie. It definitely keeps my attention the whole time, every time I watch it. Part of that's from the story, part of that's from the acting, part of that's from the music. It's just like a great combination of all of it. Does it feel too slow, too rushed, or just right? I think it's just right. I don't think there's any point where I watch this movie and I go, move on, let's get on with it. But I also think that they do a good job of slowing things down when it's necessary and letting you sit in certain moments and not feeling like they rushed you through anything. And so I give this, for pacing and entertainment value, a 4.5 out of 5. Again, right between good and excellent, because it is solid. I'm not going to put it in that outstanding area, but pacing and entertainment value is getting a 4.5 out of 5 from me. Then we move on to dialogue and quotability. Are there iconic or memorable lines? Do people still quote it? Does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? Yes, there are iconic or memorable lines. Again, the Houston, we have a problem line is very iconic. Do people still quote it? Yeah, because people say Houston, we have a problem a lot when there's a problem, even if it has nothing to do with NASA or anything to do with Houston. But yeah, there's some iconic and memorable lines in this film, and that one in particular is very iconic. Does the dialogue feel natural or cringy? I think the dialogue feels very natural. I'm sure a lot of that has to do with the fact that you had the real guys involved in telling their story and how they felt and what was said and the conversations and all that. So when the actors and the writers and the director and all that, when they're able to pull that from these people, then it begins to feel genuine and real. And so you have great actors delivering real moments that they've been told what to feel and what to think, and what they're supposed to be feeling in the moment as they deliver these lines, and what they're supposed to be thinking in the moment and all that, which just leads to it coming out more natural. So I gave the dialogue and quotability 4 out of 5, sitting right there at good. Now let's look at soundtrack and score. Does the music enhance the film or date it? Does it elevate the emotional tone of the film, or feel out of place? Is it iconic or generic? Does the music enhance the film or date it? The music in this film is it reminds me a lot of 90s. I don't think it dates the film, but at the same time, there are certain themes or certain musical numbers in the film that feel very of the time. Not that it dates the film; it fits today just fine. It's just, as someone who grew up in heavily getting my cutting my teeth on cinema as a kid growing up in the 90s and learning, what I like about movies and all that kind of stuff at the time. There's a lot of things that remind. There's a lot of things in certain aspects of the music in this movie that, especially when they're are getting to points where they're trying to make you feel that kind of edge of your seat, something's going wrong, something's like you're supposed to, that tension kind of thing. I can think of certain other movies where like there's similar sounds or similar similar things that are happening musically where like this movie does it or this movie does it or this movie does it, but it reminds me of that time, that mid-90s time, or probably, yeah, the early to late 90s, essentially the entire 90s, but there's that aspect of it where it does remind me of the time while still it doesn't feel dated, if that makes sense. But it definitely enhances the film. I was trying to pay particular attention to the music as I watched this, and I realized just how much the music, as it should and as it's supposed to, informs me on how I should feel about what's happening. Not that I couldn't come to some conclusion by watching it, but music, if it does its job properly, as you're watching something happen, it just kind of cranks things up to 11 for you. If it's a happy moment, it can crank that up to 11. If it's a sad moment, it can crank that up to 11. If it's a tense, edge of your seat, what's fixing to happen, oh no, it can crank that up to 11. And so I think this movie does a fantastic job with those aspects as well. And then there's the kind of patriotic horns and snare drum stuff and all that reminds me a little bit of kind of the stuff that some of that music is just very American music to me. And I don't mean like rah-rah American flag America music in like from a military aspect, as much as there's a level of that. There's a certain thing about that horn and snare drum mix that they use that feels very American in nature, where I don't feel like those the way that those things are put together, I don't feel like are done as much in other countries or films about other happenings that involving other countries and things like that. I don't know if that makes any sense at all, but there's a certain thing about that just feels very American. And in the moment, the music made me feel patriotic and in ways. And like I said, not in a 4th of July, Independence Day, freedom kind of whatever thing, but in a like proud of what the men and women involved in all this were able to accomplish. And so I was proud. It made me proud of their accomplishments, and it made me proud to be from a place that was able to accomplish such a feat. And so anyway, is it iconic or generic? I think it's not iconic in that you're not going to go around humming the score, but it's iconic in that in the moment it feels like the most right thing that could be there. And so soundtrack and score for me, I'm giving this a 4 out of 5, sitting right there at good. Moving along to cinematography and visual style, is it visually engaging or stylish? Regardless of effects budget or genre, do the camera work and effects still impress, or do they look dated or clunky? Does the film feel fresh and inspired? Well, Ron Howard is an incredible director. I have such love for many of the films that he's been involved with. It is very visually engaging. I don't know about necessarily stylish, but like the film itself feels like you're there. They do a really good job. Maybe from a stylish perspective, they do a really good job of putting you in 1970. It doesn't feel like it doesn't feel like you're watching a movie about 1970. It feels like you're watching a docudrama about 1970. You know what I mean? It doesn't feel like, oh, clearly they have made this look a certain way, and it feels like someone put up a camera and was filming all this in 1970, which I think is a testament to the job that they did. But yeah, I mean, it's a visually engaging film. It sucks you right into the time that it's happening, that era. From a effects perspective, I was looking, knowing this was a 1995 film, I was looking and trying to go like, where are the areas where something sticks out to me and goes, and I'm like, that's a little kind of wonky or whatever. But like, with the exception of maybe one point where you see a large bit of fire. I think it may be the fire that's coming out from the thrusters as the ship initially takes off. That may be the one point where the fire kind of envelops the whole screen. That may be the one point where I thought that doesn't look like, that looks like either a miniature fireball that you've slowed down and composited in somehow or whatever. But that was the one thing that I thought maybe they did something whatever there that just kind of looks maybe sort of a little off. But the rest of this is fantastic, and I didn't think. I mean, I watched this movie for years without thinking about the fact that everything that they did while they were in space looked super realistic, and the lack of gravity seems to be real. In my head, they somehow faked all that. I guess I just thought they made a movie and that's just what they do. In my head, I never considered, they were like went through the process of making sure these guys were in a zero-G environment in order to create this realism. And I mean, I don't know how you do it any better. I really don't. I don't, even from you bringing it into modern day with CG and all that kind of stuff, I don't know how you do it any better than shooting it in true near CG, or what they call microgravity. But they went through a lot to make sure that this was very realistic. The camera works great. The miniature effects and things that they did with miniatures, all of it looks super good. And I don't know exactly how they did everything. I haven't watched a ton of behind the scenes stuff, which I would really like to. But my guess, as I watched certain things, I thought, well, that's probably a miniature, or that's probably a miniature, or that's probably done this way, or that's probably done that way. But it's very impressive going back and watching this film, with the exception of the fact that like it I guess probably was shot on 70 millimeter film. You can see the film grain, so there's that. It doesn't look, but anyway, it's a great looking film. The effects don't stick out as being effects. They're very well blended. It looks as real as you could possibly make a movie like this look, especially in 1995. It does nothing in this film looks dated, other than the fact that it's supposed to be 1970, and 1970 is dated. So cinematography and visual style, I give a 4.5 out of 5 after jabbering on a lot about it. But that's the kind of stuff that I love. If you ever notice, I love all that category of stuff. Moving on to originality and creativity. Does the film feel fresh and inspired, like something you've seen 100 times? Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? Does it bring something unique? Well, let's talk kind of like we just did. The film, I think, feels fresh and inspired. I think it was very inspired by not just the story, but wanting to tell the story in a way that didn't feel campy or wonky or shooting things in a way that felt fake. It was like they wanted to make this as real as possible. I think it feels very fresh. Definitely did at the time. It still does. It doesn't feel like something I've seen 100 times, because I've seen many, many space movies that don't hit it like this does. Even movies that came after this, so many of them failed in so many ways where this one succeeds. Was the film groundbreaking or formulaic? Well, it was definitely a groundbreaking film to be the first one to use NASA's, plane to do what they do. And they essentially, if you're not real, I can't explain it real well, but if you're not real familiar, they go very, very, very high altitude in these planes, and they go up, and then they do these arcs where they start to come back down. But as the plane starts to come back down, you kind of start to float in the plane. In the way that they do it, it creates this zero-G kind of feeling atmosphere, and that's something NASA has and does, and how they train people and do that. But I guess, movies, this was the first one to ever do it, but films have been able to make deals with NASA and go use that technology and that plane and that whole system to go shoot things and make it be as real as possible when it comes to the feeling of being in space. But this being the first one to do it, yes, I would say that's groundbreaking. I don't think the film feels formulaic at all. Does it bring something unique? Yeah, it's just a very unique film in my opinion, because there's a lot of true stories, but there's a lot of true stories about things going wrong, about people dying. And so they tell the story of somebody who gets all this way or does all this stuff, or is a very inspiring life, and yet it ends badly. But there's not a lot of stories like this where something goes this terribly wrong and someone is in such a stranded, like, helpless situation as far as, yes, they had ability to communicate. What I mean by helpless is, like, you're not going to pull over a 7-Eleven in space. Like, there was nothing they could do other than, like, try to solve these problems and try to get home. So this is such a unique story in and of itself, which makes this a very unique film. There's not another space movie like this as far as going to space and a true story. This is a one-of-a-kind film to me. And so for originality and creativity, I give this a 4 out of 5. Now moving on to theme and message. Is there a deeper takeaway, and does it explore ideas that resonate today? I think that the theme of this film, I don't think it's meant to be. It's meant to just trying to tell a story, right? It's trying to tell the story of these people. But if you could take a theme out or pull something out of it, I think it is that it's what we are capable of, and what not giving up in these dire moments where you could just go, we're just nothing we can do here, or these the guys on the ground, government, NASA, all that, they could have decided, hey, we're not going to be able to get these guys back, or this is impossible. But I think, like, it's a testament to the people who are in charge that said we're not going to lose these men. We are going to do everything we can. Everybody that jumped into gear. It shows what people are capable of doing, the problems that people are capable of solving, and what it means to persevere in a moment, in a situation like this. It makes you want to, never take no for an answer, or never take a bad situation as the final answer, but always know, like, hey, I'm going to do whatever I can to either get out of this or get past this or whatever, because that's really there's no other answer, right? If you don't say, hey, I'm gonna like step up here and do whatever needs to be done or whatever I can do to fix this situation. If you just kind of sit around and expect somebody else to do something, or you don't take initiative, or you have a negative attitude and say this is never going to work, or we're never going to, like, attitude has a lot to do with this. So the fact that these guys were, like, there's a scene in this film where I'm going to kind of not cut back and forth, but from there earlier in the film, right? There's a fantastic shot, and I love the way that he does it. I love the choice of the kind of overhead shot. This is before, I think before they find out he's going to the moon, or maybe after, or I don't remember. But anyway, it may have been. It doesn't really matter. He's concerned with the moon. Tom Hanks as Jim. And the camera is shooting him from above this whole time. It's not ground level with him. It's not, it's probably a crane or whatever, but it's shooting him from very high up. Like, he's down and it's showing him down there, and as he looks up to the moon. And I think that's a fantastic choice in general to not just shoot him from ground level looking up at the moon, but shooting him from up above as he looks up. It gives you that sense of what it is that he's looking at and what it is that he's thinking of, this distant thing way off in the future, or way off in the distance that has seemingly been unreachable to him so far. He's just orbited the moon, but he wanted to go there and walk on it. But anyway, there's a scene where at the beginning of the movie, where he's laying on the yard bench or yard bed thing, and he's holding his thumb up and he's blocking the moon out with his thumb, and just kind of shows you how far away the moon is, where he's just able to blot it out with his thumb. And then later in the film, after everything has gone wrong, he is holding up his thumb to Earth, and now Earth is the thing that's so far away, and he moves his thumb and he moves it back and covers it up, and now he's having the same feelings about this thing being so far away. Of like, initially he was looking at the moon and just wanting to get there, and then at this point he's looking at the Earth and just wants to get there. And he tells the guys, I want to go home. I'd like to go home. And that, again, when it comes to a message and the theme of this entire film, the theme and message of this film is that mindset of, we're going to solve this. I would like to go home. Let's figure this out so that we can go home. And to me, I might have just rambled a ton about all that, and none of that might have made any sense to you, but I give this a 5 out of 5 from that kind of theme and message, because I can't think of a better mindset, and I can't think of a better story as inspiration for how to approach things in life. So yeah, theme and message for me gets a 5 out of 5. Now, moving on to cringe factor. Are there any jokes or effects or moments that haven't aged well? I don't think so. Or that were always bad? I don't think so. Moments that made you wince, or that were kind of campy or cheesy, or bad effects, or maybe outdated jokes that aren't really funny? I don't think so. There's not a thing about this movie that I find cringy in the slightest. And so I give this a 5 out of 5 on the cringe factor, meaning I don't find cringe in this film whatsoever. It's getting a 5 out of 5 for me. Let's move on now to nostalgia and rewatchability. Does it hold up to your memory of it? Does it still matter today? Is it timeless, or has it aged poorly? Does a rewatch ruin the magic, and would you honestly watch it again? Does it hold up to your memory of it? Yes. I have such fond memories of this movie growing up. Probably went and watched it in the theater. I don't particularly remember going to some movies. I have very vivid memories of going and watching things in the movie theater. This was not one of them, but I almost could guarantee you that I went and watched this film in the movie theater with family. But yes, it holds up to my memory of it 100%. Does it still matter today? I think it absolutely still matters today. I think the story still matters today. It's one of those stories that makes, like I said, it makes you proud of, if it makes you proud to be from a place that was capable of such a feat. Not that they even reached their goal, which was the moon, but when when the thing went wrong, their goal became saving these guys, and against all odds, they get them home. And so, this story matters today. Stories like this will always matter. I do think this is a timeless film. I think this is stories like this, these true stories, are timeless. And so, I don't think it's aged poorly in the slightest. If anything, as movies continue to be made, and the quality of a lot of stuff and the care that's given to things tends to not quite always be up to par, I think this movie ages even better because it's a 1995 film that you can pop in and it just beats the pants off of a lot of stuff that might be of a similar genre or whatever that is coming along, that's coming along in the current day. Does a rewatch ruin the magic? Not in the slightest. And would you honestly watch it again? Yeah, I could have turned around and probably watched it again as soon as it was over with. I just really, really love this film. So for nostalgia and rewatchability, I give this a 4.5 out of 5. All right. Now, I'm going to jump into this bonus category, but not so much like I usually would with this particular category. The bonus category that we usually do, could a theme park ride based on this film make sense? And if so, what kind of ride would it likely be? No, I'm not going to go into that. Hey, they should make a theme park ride out of this. That'd be silly. What I will say is, I think it'd be cool to see I think it'd be cool to see more rides at theme parks that gave you the experience but they gave you the space experience or the rocket ship experience and certain things like that. So I say all that to say this: there are rides. If you've ever been to Disney and you've ever ridden Mission Space, if you ride I can't remember what color it is. There's two different colors. One of them's a real kind of chill mission that orbits the Earth, and one of them you're supposed to be going to Mars. But it is my understanding they worked with NASA to create the ride, and as you are in this ride, it's a centrifuge, and it's like incredible if you've never ridden it, on making you feel feel these G's, feel the G force, and not just from one perspective, but the way the whole thing moves. You feel the down force at times, you feel the directly back force at times. It's just really incredible. So if you want the feel of shooting off in a rocket, a space rocket, legitimately beyond like, oh, I was in a roller coaster that shot me out real fast. Like, no, this is not that. This is like steady G-force for a good bit of time. If you want to experience that, then you can experience it just by going to Epcot at Disney and riding Mission Space. But also, when I was a kid, got to go to Space Camp, and there's a lot of really cool stuff there. There's a lot of cool stuff to see, a lot of cool stuff to do. There's some I think there's one ride that's kind of like this space shot, shoot you up in the air kind of thing, but that's more of a ride. But there are some contraptions that they'll put you in that will allow you to feel certain forces and things that you would feel when it comes to space travel and whatever. But I touching on this bonus category just to say that Mission Space is worth going and riding if you want to feel that. And if you ever have a chance to go to Space Camp in Huntsville, Alabama, I would definitely go do it, and I would recommend it. I haven't been since I was a kid, and so I can't tell you a lot about what it's like now because I was a small child when I went, or I don't know, I was like 11 or 12 when I went. But it was a very enjoyable time and very educational time. And so if you have kids or you just like the kind of stuff, I would look into going to space camp. This is my, obviously, this is just my own thoughts about this. Has nothing to do with anybody telling me to say anything or anything like that. But I would very much suggest a trip to space camp for anybody who's interested in any of the space stuff. But yeah, this is just a little quick thing I wanted to touch on when it came to all that. Now let's look at the actual final verdict of this. So the way this works, we'll tally up the scores of each one and see where it lands on anywhere from 1 to 50, which should be very difficult to be a 1 on here. That'd have to be a ridiculously awful movie. There's a movie that just came out that people talk about it like it's that bad. I'm not going to mention it, but you might know what I'm talking about if you've seen an Amazon film that remakes a classic that came out here recently. So first of all, let's run through these. Story and plot, I gave a 5 out of 5. Characters and performances, I gave a 4.5 out of 5. Pacing and entertainment value, 4.5 out of 5. Dialogue and quotability, 4 out of 5. Soundtrack and score, 4 out of 5. Cinematography and visual style, 4.5 out of 5. Originality and creativity, 4 out of 5. Theme and message, 5 out of 5. Cringe factor, 5 out of 5. Nostalgia and rewatchability, 4.5 out of 5. Bringing the total of Apollo 13, my score, doesn't have to be yours, to 45 out of 50, making this falling between 40 and 50 at 45 gives it a certified rewatchable status. I love this movie. I've always loved this movie. I will always love this movie. And for me, it's top tier. Certified rewatchable. With that said, that would be the end of looking into and looking at Apollo 13. If you want to keep up with things, I will say there is an Instagram account that I kind of post weekly reminders and things like that on. If you are on YouTube watching this, it would be awesome if you would give this a like and share it with people you might think would be interested, or comment down below and let me know what you think about Apollo 13. Have you ever seen it? Would you like to see it? If you've seen it, what are your thoughts on it? I'd love to have conversations around that kind of stuff with you. And then if you're listening on any of the podcast platforms, Spotify, Amazon, Apple, and beyond, then you can hit that follow button or whatever it is that you hit that lets you know that new stuff's coming up, and it'll download the latest episode for you and have it right there ready for you to watch when it comes out. As this episode comes out, it will have changed from coming out Monday mornings to coming out Tuesday mornings. It just makes a little bit more sense to me and for me and my schedule to get it kind of recorded and put together and edited and stuck on here for Tuesday mornings. But yeah, it's just kind of, it makes more sense to me as far as my schedule goes and how I would prefer to do things. And so this is going to be a Tuesday morning thing from now on, and we will see you next week.